Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast, the Superman edition. My name is Mike Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Tom Stewart is here. He's from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Tom, today we're talking about Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. How do you feel about that?
Betrayed! Betrayed!
This is a 1987 film by Sidney J. Furie, the film that ended the franchise, essentially. It was the 72nd highest grossing movie of that year. Here are some movies that beat it out. Jaws 4. We'll be talking about that soon. A lot of sequels, actually. Police Academy 4 as well. A lot of 4s this year. Over the Top.
It didn't even win the 4s.
No, yeah, couldn't. Over the Top. Ernest Goes to Camp. That's a solid list of pretty shitty movies that this movie could not beat out.
Wow.
So we both have this as the last movie ranked in our particular ranking sequels. It's the fourth one in the series, the worst one for both of us. We both declare it as a bad movie. For me, this movie is an unmitigated disaster, and there's just so much of it that's so bad. I can't wait to talk about it, frankly.
I'd call it a mitigated disaster.
Of course you would.
A disaster with mitigating circumstances.
Your ability to love what's unlovable is one of the things I love about you.
Hey, I'm talking from the perspective of someone who owned these movies on VHS. I think it's now we can stream movies, we can get instant access to movies. When you have a whole tape dedicated to something,
it holds a special place in your heart.
Yeah, you wanna give it a chance, and you wanna forgive what you can, but it's harder to forgive this one than Superman 3.
I mean, right from the beginning, right from the credits for me. I see these credits and I just think, that's poor man Superman credits.
Yeah, the credits are garbage. I mean, it's like fan film graphics that they're using here. It's a really and the trajectory. We go back to this after experimenting with a slapstick comedy title sequence in the previous film. We go back to the original, words flying around the world. But even if you look at the trajectory, if you look at the trajectory of those titles, it's like, it makes no sense. Where are they coming from? Where are they going?
Not at all.
What programming did you put in to make these words do this? It's a really bad sign of. They to just go behind the curtain a little bit. They ran out of money as they were making this movie. So this is really something,
and it's clearly evident.
But this is something
on
I'd
the
rather
screen
film
that they had these problems.
Unfortunately, they didn't film in chronological order. If so, you would have had an extraordinary, credit sequence, and then it would gradually get worse and worse.
At a certain point, it's
just very inconsistent.
Be leaning. If they shot in order, I imagine people in the theater would just be leaning over, going, "What happened in this movie?"
Is the focus okay?
Yeah.
Is the hey, projectionist? It's a really, really bad start, and no cold open.
Yeah,
the
first
Superman
in the series
sequel
without a cold open. They're just dropping balls all over the place.
They really are. And,
in terms of what works for a Superman movie,
right? Also, a big kind of red flag that's put up early in this credit sequence is story by Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, he demanded that and a lot of money in order to come back. He wanted some more creative control, and
Yeah.
The only word that comes to mind is oops.
I mean, I
And I
wonder
say
whether
that
we'll
as a
see.
Christopher Reeve fan. I love
Absolutely,
him.
I just, I wonder how many times we'll see, that kind of vanity project takeover of a sequel. I think we're going to see it quite a lot. I can think of one right now that is that's burning in my brain. We may never get there, so I'm going to say it. Busta Rhymes in Halloween.
Halloween. Yeah.
Halloween. What's the one? The reality show one? I
I
don't
think
even know
it's
the
just
name
called
of
The
it.
Curse of Michael Myers. But
No, that's a much earlier one. Anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there. Busta Rhymes in one of the Halloween
yeah.
films basically makes it all about him and destroys the movie. And I don't think I don't think it quite gets there. And thank heaven, thank Zod, he's on screen. That it's him playing
Right.
Superman at least, but it's a very bad sign. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck.
So,
I could feel that spidey
right.
sense of
The
something.
crux of the story is it's very strange. Basically Lex Luthor is back. He escapes from prison yet again, yet with the help of the
Yes.
poor man's Otis in Lenny, as played by John Cryer.
His nephew Lenny,
Lenny.
yeah, who of course we've heard about before.
Right. Yeah.
He's always
He's
talking about
constantly
old
talking
Lenny.
about his nephew that he wants to bring into his schemes in the first couple movies.
I can't wait to get rid of Otis so I can do crimes with Lenny.
And I don't even know why Otis isn't back. Like, I would love the idea of Gene Hackman saying, "Yeah, sure, I'll come back," and they go to Ned Beatty, and he goes, "No." He just says, "No, I'm not coming back. Thank you."
Well, good on Ned Beatty. It's a smart
Right.
decision.
Essentially, Lex Luthor is loose again. He starts talking
Yes.
about things like Superman's hair and combining his hair with some sort of proprietary gel that he's made in order to launch it into the sun and create a nuclear man.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Superman is vowing to get rid of all the nuclear weapons, which strangely
Yes.
happens in a space of about 5 minutes. The movie's called The Quest for
Yeah.
Peace, and he gets rid of the problem in 5 minutes in the middle of this movie. One of its many problems.
He solves world peace in the first act of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting choice.
But again, as we've talked
script-wise.
about before, Superman, bit of a dick, space is his garbage dump. He's just launching these, every nuclear missile on the planet into the sun, which I would think would have some sort of effect, but...
Oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's thinking about here and now, He's the sort of climate change denier, of space.
There you go.
he's got,
He's the original.
He's like,
he's the original
I'll just think
denier.
about. He's like, none of this is gonna, He didn't even learn from the time that sending a nuclear weapon into space released 3 of his greatest enemies.
Right? Yeah. He learns no lessons. This man.
No, he learns absolutely no lessons. But this is a movie where I'm sure no one has even seen the previous movies who's making it.
That's true. So in this movie,
does not
we
feel like
have the return of Lois Lane, the not commented on at all banishment of Lana from Smallville.
Right. She's somewhere in the sort of like the I don't know. She's
Lana Lang's just gone, man. And then we introduce.
She ends up as
We introduce a new love interest, at least for Clark. Superman
Yeah.
still seems to be very interested in Lois Lane, but Clark is digging Mariel Hemingway as Lacey Warfield. So this movie is clearly going in different directions. There's not really a lot of continuity going on.
No, there's zero continuity. I think it's fair to say that since Superman 1 and 2 do talk to each other quite a lot. From 3 onwards, there's no sense of. It's like a reset clock every time.
Right?
Which is is sad in some ways because I think clearly at the end of every movie you get a sense that, oh, these people's stories are going to go on, and of course they don't. And they don't in any way. I mean, you know, everyone comes back once again. The saving grace of the movie is that you know no one is particularly missing, at least from the original cast, right. Which is it's pretty extraordinary given how low quality a sequel this is, that they're all back. You think at least one of them would have jumped ship by now.
Well, I mean, yeah, and Gene Hackman did jump ship and then came back.
Yeah, and
presumably he needed a pool or something. I don't know.
Well, clearly the conditions in his contract were that he didn't have to look anyone in the eye
ever.
And he's like, yeah, I can live with that.
That is a professional actor.
Yeah,
like as good as an actor can be, phoning it in. It's a marvel to watch.
But it's this kind of strange. Gene Hackman's great. I mean, he is somewhat phoning it in, but he's still perfectly good. The character of Lex Luthor, they don't know what they want to do with him anymore. I don't think they even quite know. At one point, I'm like, do they think he's like a Highlander? Right. He's like dating prostitutes dressed as Marie Antoinette. At one point, he dresses up like Run DMC. And then at the end of the movie, like Dick Dastardly from the... it's just, they don't quite know what kind of a villain they want him to be.
It's like they want him to go full Snidely Whiplash. You know, you get the twisting of the mustache.
Exactly. So it's a very confused movie, and there's no character consistency.
Well, here's what I want to talk about right now. You know, when we talked in our last episode about Superman 3, we talked about an abundance of flaws in Superman 3 that we just sort of have no problem with. For some reason, it still works. And there is so much shit in this movie that makes you out loud say, what the hell is that? Why is that there? So what is it about this movie that's, you know, just makes you so unforgiving? Because I know I was, as I was watching it, I was like, this is... Why am I seeing this on the screen right now?
Well, I'm a little forgiving, but I am more damning of this one. And I think it's because, you know, I'm just not on board with the project of this movie. It tries to be political. It tries to carry on the political vein of the third movie, and to some extent the second movie. But it does so in a way that's like, you know, doesn't rise above the level of an after-school special.
It's certainly not focused, you know. So Superman visits the UN, but instead of getting maybe what we want, instead we're watching UN protocol, where he needs a sponsor before he can speak, and of course everybody in the world raises their hand as a sponsor, that kind of, you know, thing.
We get a scene where which kind of just doesn't contain any of the characters from the movie. We go into a classroom where they're watching the president talk about the nuclear crisis on TV, and then the teacher starts asking children questions, and it's this classroom full of like future Fox News pundits going, well, that'll do a lot of good. That's talking to politicians. Stupid. And then it feels like
well, I just love this idea.
It feels like propaganda.
Yeah, it does a little bit. And I you know, it's funny that I love this idea that the whole movie is about the quest for peace, and Superman goes to the UN and basically just announces he's getting rid of all nuclear weapons to thunderous applause. You can't possibly tell me that there's not anybody in the world that would go, hey, wait a second, I want my nuclear weapons, or I at least want nuclear power, you know? I mean...
Apparently it's just Lex Luthor, Jim Broadbent, and the lieutenant
cameo.
From Batman. They're the only people
You're always seeing a Brit that's gonna, you know, at some point be in our collective consciousness in a far bigger way, or win Academy Awards in an early Superman movie.
Yeah, so I just I'm not on board with kind of what this movie's trying to do, and so everything counts against it because of that.
Agreed. So Actually, we're going to stop it right there. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and then we'll get back into Superman 4 and some particularly horrible nonsense. We'll see you in a minute. Are you a beer novice? Are you a beer snob? Are you something in between? Wherever you lie on the beer spectrum, you can probably relate to Stephen J. Weiss and Dan Aker of the Vegas Beer Guys. The Vegas Beer Guys are a live show. You can find them on Facebook or Instagram. Check them out as they try new beers and learn about beers. Steve, being a bit of a beer novice, learns right at the feet of a beer guru like Dan Aker. They try beers and they'll tell you about beers. They'll tell you where to steer clear from and where you should be going. They're just a great time. You're going to have a great time watching them. Go ahead and check out the Vegas Beer Guys. And we're back. We're talking about Superman 4, here with Tom Stewart. I'm Mike Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Tom's with Lonesome Whistle Productions. Tom, we're in the part of the story of Quest for Peace. We've talked about Superman's decision to rid the country of nuclear material.
Yes.
And then he just starts collecting missiles. Apparently, I couldn't tell. It's not really easy to tell within the scope of the direction of Sidney J. Fury whether or not he's asked everyone to start launching their missiles or whether or not they're just indiscriminately trying to destroy everything.
Yes.
But they start launching missiles and he starts collecting them and putting them in a giant net in outer space.
Yeah, what's that net made of?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, it is, you know, it's interesting because it is part of a pattern of, you know, treating space like his garbage dump, but there is a lot of unknowns here. I had exactly the same thought when I watched it. I think it eventually becomes clear that they're launching them into space so he can catch them, but it's not, you know, it's not clear in the way it's
not clear at all.
It's not clear at all.
And apparently they missed one, because then you have a scene where Gene Hackman launches a final missile after he's thrown every missile in the world into the sun.
And
he launches one more miraculously somehow, but with Nuclear Man's, you know, primordial ooze? I don't even know what to call it.
Yeah, I like Gene Hackman gets a chance to do an unofficial screen test for Crimson Tide in those. That's completely the like beginnings of that captain from Crimson Tide when he's pretending to be a general. I don't understand what is really in that little box. Some kind of like gelatinous chicken with some hair
combined with Superman's hair.
Yeah.
Launched into the sun that gives birth to Nuclear Man, as played by Mark Pillow, with a total of 3 credits on the IMDb.
Who looks like he's having a stroke when he roars. I don't even know why he roars.
Why does he roar? That's my question.
I don't know what's so nuclear about Nuclear Man.
Roaring seems to be his most effective way of communicating.
Well, and this is where
words are not exactly his thing.
This is where the movie makes a good dubbing choice, because his voice is dubbed with Lex Luthor, because I guess the idea is he has some of Lex's genetic material inside him, and so he speaks with his voice. And this spares us from whatever Mark Pillow sounds like. Which I'm gonna say with that.
What does he sound like? I'm gonna say
with that any foreknowledge is awful.
Because I just assumed it must be like, "Hi everybody, I'm gonna get you now, Superman."
Yeah,
and they were like, you know what? We'll just have Hackman do the voice.
And he comes out very, very glamorous. Like he's born in this kind of nuclear space egg.
He is born in costume.
Yes,
he is born in costume.
He got his nails did. And I don't understand why the nuclear material is only in his nails and nowhere else on his body.
Yeah, there's a lot of oomph in those nails, because in the first fight he has with Superman, he gives him a bit of a scratch.
Yeah.
And then Superman has the flu for like 2 weeks.
That's right. It's interesting. I mean, this is where you start to get both the nuclear weapon disposal and the birth of I was going to say Pillow Man, but that's the That's a play. The Nuclear Man.
Now that's a character I'd
That
like
would
to
have been
have
as
seen.
good a name, I think. Um, this movie had a much longer original cut. It was like two and a half
Yeah.
hours, and
They cut
they cut about an hour of it, and this was we have new producers here, Golan Globus, who are a couple of Israeli film producers who ran Canon Films, who were renowned for cheap schlock, and this was their attempt, along with the Masters of the Universe big screen adaptation, to kind of go legit, go mainstream. By taking on these big popular franchises, and they made the decision that what this 2.5 hour cut was tested, and it tested really well, and I believe it was probably quite a good film. But for some reason, at that point, they were like, "Oh, great, we can take an hour out of it." It's imagine how good it'll be at 90 minutes. But
then we can have an extra showing a day.
And then that's
with the packed theaters.
That philosophy leads to a lot of there's a lot of material on the cutting room floor, and that really matters. There was in fact another Nuclear Man that was cut out of the movie. There was an original a kind of the first time Lex does the experiment, it doesn't work, and you have this.
Yeah, it was the experiment that didn't work.
So you have this kind of Frankenstein's monster.
But it was
Nuclear
like
Man.
pure comic relief. Like you could see on like the extras when they show scenes, he kind of looks like Pizza the Hut.
Yes, that's right.
It's like it's such a mess.
I tell you, I would have welcomed it though, and I fully believe that cut would have been a better movie because there's so much confusion around what we actually see on screen and how it's pieced together. So, I mean, that's almost another movie's worth of footage.
That cannot be denied.
I'm sure not all of it was good because they didn't have the money.
How could it be based on what we're seeing? I mean, just for the record, we're seeing I'd like to first of all know who was the part of the art department for this movie, because for the first time in the Superman series, we see Superman's apartment, and it's decked out with things like pennants.
Yes.
Like, sport team pennants.
Yes.
Like, this is a 40-year-old man who's apparently a fan of the New York Giants, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Yale, and the Wisconsin Badgers. I mean, I'd like the backstory on how, Clark Kent became a fan of the Wisconsin Badgers.
Having established in the previous movie that he never made the football team. As like his thing, that he was the nerd of Smallville. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I think you've said it before to me that it's the non-American production of this movie shows through them. It's like, yeah, you Americans, you like this football. This
is what these Americans
like.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It's like, just throw in more pendant. You like pendants, and you like football. Yeah. It's obviously nonsense.
You like that American football, don't you?
It's obviously nonsense. And it's filmed in Britain once again, and perhaps the most egregious use of British locations. The New York, where we see the United Nations building, and I use that name loosely, is set in a town in Britain called Milton Keynes, which substitutes for New York. And the only commonality between them is that they are both built on a grid structure. So obviously whoever was behind scouting locations thought, oh well, the town planning is the same, so it'll look like New York when we put it on screen. Right. These are the same.
That's the other thing about all the Superman movies that have always kind of made me laugh is, from the source material, this is supposed to be taking place in Metropolis.
Yes.
And it always is made to clearly be New York. You're constantly seeing the Statue of Liberty and the Twin Towers and, all these New York landmarks, and it's just never, ever talked about. Which makes me wonder, in this universe, what's New York look like?
Oh, maybe it looks more like Milton Keynes. Maybe we're being very unfair towards these.
Speaking to your idea of the lack of money in this movie, the things that are most egregious to me in this movie are First of all, the use of cables holding up the
Right.
actors that you can
Yeah.
see. When they fight on the moon, you could see them being held
Yes.
up by these poor people are being held up by wires. You could see a group of army men that Nuclear Man tries to levitate just being pulled
Mm-hmm.
up by wires. Nuclear Man at one point starts smashing through ceilings in the Daily Planet, and you could just clearly see he's being pulled up through the
Yeah.
debris on a wire. I mean, it looks just so
There are
terrible.
one or two perfectly good effects, and because they ran out of money, the rest of it is
I need you to tell me what they are.
the opening scene with the Russian spaceship that Superman
Okay.
which should have been a cold open actually. That looks fine. There's a scene that when John Cryer was interviewed a few years ago, he talked about. Uh,
The car
Yeah, the
lifting?
car lifting at the very
Yeah.
end of the movie, which was what they did on day one, and he was apparently so excited because they did it for real. They levitated the car into the air. They had Superman like on levitated too, and it looks really good in the movie. But he was like, "Oh my god, this is day one. Can you imagine what like day 50 is going to be like?"
Right.
But the opposite was true, and they were like running out of money, and just the reuse of the same flying shot again and again and again. I
Yeah.
think in the
Over and
first
over and
two
over.
minutes of the film, we've seen the same shot of Superman flying reused twice. So we have an average of a reuse of 1 minute. But what I don't understand, this is the dilemma I'm in, right? The movie ends with the shot which is at the end of all the Superman movies where Superman flies. He's leaving the world, and you see the sun in the background, and he turns and looks at the camera and smiles,
As he
as he
always
always
does.
does. If they can put that in the movie, why can't they just take all the effects from 1 to 3? I mean,
Right.
it's not like it's basically you could have just used it as stock footage. I mean, it's just him flying. There's nothing specific, really.
Right.
I mean, it's.
I mean, there's so many things that just seem. I, I can't explain why I'm so unforgiving towards this movie. Strange things happen, in the original Superman. He starts flying around the Earth to reverse
Yeah.
time. Is that what would actually happen? I don't, my point is Richard Donner makes you believe
Yes.
it. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
I think that's the difference.
In this movie, I'm constantly wondering, at some point he moves the moon closer to the Earth, and I'm thinking, well, that's gonna fuck some shit up. Like that's gonna create some problems, my
Boy, that
friend.
movie really moved the moon in that scene, didn't it? I think
Right?
that's another
He
the skyscraper. Wow,
Nuclear Man.
Yeah,
At
I
one,
think it is. It's just goes. I mean, we're back to powers beyond reason, and they're
sure,
taking it as far as they can possibly go. But there is a point in which when Marielle Hemingway as Lacey is taken into space by Nuclear Man. For what reason,
right.
I still don't really know. I think that was on the cutting room floor as well, whatever their relationship is.
But she's in outer
Yeah.
space. She seems to have a problem with gravity because she's falling in outer space.
And she's breathing fine.
She's breathing fine. There are no issues with the cold
She,
vacuum of space.
unless she turns out to be Supergirl, she should be straight out dead.
You're right.
That's the only way in which this
mean-
movie could have pulled it back at that point. Just like suddenly she takes off and she's like, "I'm Supergirl, okay? I'm trying to
She can't be
get it on
because
with
we all
my
know
own."
that Helen Slater is Supergirl.
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder whether we should include that, but even everything sequel has its limits.
I hear you. I hear you.
I'm not watching Peter Cook try and act for an hour and a half. I am sorry. Yeah, so it's very problematic. I mean, there are some good points here. As I said, the full complement of cast are back from the original Superman 1 and 2, which even though she's written horribly, even though Lois Lane is written horribly to the point where it's not even the same character.
Right.
Margot Kidder really pulls off the emotional stuff. Her and Clark Kent have some pretty intense scenes together, and they both do a great job, but her especially. I am also going to say I kind of like some of the social satire of the newspaper business.
I have to
Yeah,
admit that that's maybe the one thing that they get right in that movie is just sort of the idea of where newspapers were going
yeah,
at
yeah.
that
The
time, and
corporatization of
yeah,
of journalism. They have a lot to say in the movie about that, and I think it's pretty well done.
I'll give it that
It's on the
credit.
nose. I like this kind this idea of like, and this is probably again, it's like my own personal what I like in movies. I love the like in the Bond movies when he has to work with a feminist, and it's a
Right.
similar kind, where he's pushed into this modern world that he doesn't know, and I love that kind of thing. And it's the same like Clark Kent in the world of yuppies, in the world of like 80s
Yeah.
materialism.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great, this the gym sequence and the guy who tries to the guy the
You have the precursor to the Mrs. Doubtfire scene where he has to go to dinner both as Clark and
yeah,
Superman.
which as soon as and which he has to Superman then has to leave abruptly, which leaves no
Yeah.
which meant they wouldn't know what happened to Clark. There's no explanation for what happened to Clark. They would think Clark was dead, is what they would think. So there are a few high points in the movie, but they're few and far between, which is not good for a movie that's barely 90 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
It's the shortest of the
The
movies.
idea of having a 90-minute movie is that it's lean and mean.
Right.
And in this movie, you've got, Superman looking like he's, or rather Clark Kent looking like he's going to murder Lois Lane by just having them both jump off of his apartment
I
building.
was just going to talk about that. So, in the Superman 2 episode, we talked a little bit about how it was, there was a level of political incorrectness around the date rape kiss and the sort of like,
Yeah.
The Niagara Falls negging and that kind of stuff. It wasn't very, it wasn't...
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. But here, not only, it left me wondering, how many times is Clark Kent walking Lois off a tall building, flying around with her, and then date rape kissing her? Like, does he do this on a regular basis?
They bring back the kiss.
It made me think that,
this
like,
thing that everybody,
'cause he can,
so many people hated about the second movie, they brought back a second time.
in a way that makes you think that this is what he does every other day. That he's basically gaslighting
in
her.
a really ugly way.
That he's gaslighting her because I don't know if it's just because Margot Kid is kind of like struggling for anything, but in the scene with the radiation poisoning, where she goes and visits Clark Kent and he's like an old man because of the radiation poisoning, she starts saying things that make it sound like she implicitly knows that Clark is Superman, who's just date rape kissing her all the time. Like, there's almost a suggestion that she's like, I know who you are, okay? I'm playing along for your benefit.
I know you're the monster.
Yeah.
Who keeps,
and, again, it might just be that she's grasping for any depth of emotion and that I'm completely misreading it. But, their relationship gets even more troubling in this. They double down on that thing that you could just about excuse. In terms of political correctness and gender equality, is completely blown out of the water here.
Right. Well, what a great place to leave it. Let's leave it on a downer. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break for a second. That is Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. When we come back, we're going to pitch a sequel. Stay tuned. Are you a beer novice? Are you a beer snob? Are you something in between? Wherever you lie on the beer spectrum, you can probably relate to Stephen J. Weiss and Dan Aker of the Vegas Beer Guys. The Vegas Beer Guys are a live show. You can find them on Facebook or Instagram. Check them out as they try new beers and learn about beers. Steve, being a bit of a beer novice, learns right at the feet of a beer guru like Dan Aker. They try beers and they'll tell you about beers. They'll tell you where to steer clear from and where you should be going. They're just a great time. You're going to have a great time watching them. Go ahead and check out the Vegas Beer Guys. And we're back. This is the portion of our show that we call Pitch a Sequel. I'm so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, you can always find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. Send us what you think. Pitch your sequel. Vote on our sequels. Tell us which one you think you would want to make. Tom.
Yes.
We're going to pitch a sequel. Are you ready? What is your sequel for the Superman series?
Well, my sequel is called Five Uperman, in which the S of Superman is a 5, because it's the 5th film in the franchise, in the tradition of Sesevenin and Numthrias.
If you say so.
It begins, as all the great Superman movies do, with a cold open.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Krypton, BS, before Superman. It's before Superman's birth. A young Superman's mother, I can't remember her name. We'll figure that out later.
Oh, me neither.
But it's whatever Superman's mother's
Details.
has been kidnapped by a young Zod, young General Zod. He's probably like Private Zod or Rear Lieutenant Zod. Let's say Lieutenant Zod has kidnapped her,
Zod!
and he's holding her hostage and trying to get Jor-El to surrender to him by holding her hostage. We see a figure, a dark, mysterious figure arrive. Is it Jor-El? No, it's Superman. But how can Superman be here? This is before he was born on Krypton, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, it turns out that Superman has thrown so much nuclear garbage into space, he's blown a hole in the space-time continuum, which has allowed him to go back to Krypton before his birth. And he's just been standing around lurking, watching his parents begin their relationship. And when he sees his mother in danger, something kicks it.
Does he watch the conception?
Hey, it's... I'm continuing on the trend of the inappropriate sex in these movies.
All right, carry on.
We don't see that, but it's implied. And he's just hanging around. Something biological kicks in, and he goes to save his mother, and he punches Zod in the face and rescues his mother before Jor-El can get there. And then realizing that he's screwed up royally, he leaves Krypton and flies back to Earth. Okay, that's the end of the cold open. It's going to be pretty long. Then we have a title sequence that summarizes movies 1 to 4 at great length. After that, we're back at the Daily Planet, where Lois Lane, Lana Lang, and Lacey Warfield, is it?
Warfield,
yeah, who now all work at the Daily Planet, as per the past 3 movies, are all talking about going on a date with Clark, and they're in a love quadrangle with Clark, and in a group in a series of hilarious misunderstandings, which are a callback to the director Richard Lester. They begin to realize that they all thought they were on a date with Clark, but no one was. And in fact, no one's seen Clark in a long time. What's happened? He's disappeared from time because he's altered the space-time continuum and prevented his parents from having sex and him being born. So he now doesn't exist. He's a non-person on Earth. No one knows who he is. He's like James Stewart in the last half hour of It's a Wonderful Life. No one knows who he is. People can see him, but they don't. He can talk to people, but they don't know who he is. No one knows who Superman is. No one knows who Clark Kent is. So he has to find a way to fix time and get everything back to normal again. He goes into the Daily Planet archives, and he finds out who's working and researching on time travel. Who does it turn out to be but his old friend Gus Gorman, who just as he invented a supercomputer from a bunch of cigarette papers, has now invented a time machine from, I don't know, on the back of a beer bottle or something. All right, so he and Gus Gorman set about fixing time. At some point, they involve both Lex Luthor and Ross Webster to help them.
Oh, just everybody's coming back.
So they to help him fix the time continuum, because they're all geniuses and they all get together. And when Superman finally fixes time and he's able to spend 5 minutes with his father in real life, and he gets to meet his father and talk to his father, and in that scene, because we can pull from any time. These are fantasy sequels. It looks like for a minute that it's just going to be a double and Marlon Brando's not going to be there. And then suddenly he comes out of the shadows and it really is Marlon Brando as Jor-El. He came back after all for the 5th film. And then Superman flies around the earth and does the face thing with a smile.
All right.
That's the end of the movie.
Fantastic.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, Tom has got his Let's Bring Everybody Back soup for a sequel. Here's my pitch for a sequel. I'm not sure, Tom, whether or not producers are. I don't know. Are they gonna go for the Tom soup, or are they gonna go for my Brainiac and Red Sun story?
Ooh.
I too have a. The reason I say that is that this is based on a comic. The idea is based on a comic called Brainiac and the Red Sun story. I was thinking of what villain should we deal with next? And I thought to myself, Brainiac is the way to go. So I wanted to bring Brainiac back in. We have a cold open in mind as well. Mm-hmm. In the cold open, Brainiac successfully shrinks Washington, D.C. Now, Superman is able to stop him, but he can't bring the city back. So it's like we've lost D.C.
Right.
For some of you, this is probably not a loss, but we're going to say that the capital of our country being lost is a downer. So Brainiac goes to jail. He's kind of, they're closing off circuits to his brain, cutting off brain activity, kind of like Magneto in the X-Men movies when he's in his little plastic prison. And then we come to find out that he's been working all along with Lex Luthor. And Luthor's going to bust him out of jail. So now, meanwhile, Clark is working still at the Daily Planet. And he has to choose between, I have Lana coming back as well.
Okay.
And he has to choose between Lana and Lois.
Not Lacey.
Lacey, out of the picture.
What?
In my... You know how sometimes when they start a sequel and they think, disregard these other sequels when they bring it up? I'm almost completely disregarding Superman for the Quest for Peace. It's not that you couldn't have had it, but I'm just saying the two real love interests for me, for Clark and Superman, thinking of the duality of the man, it's Lana or Lois. And so he is sort of stuck in the middle between these two women. And he needs to sort of convince, himself which direction he needs to go. So at the same time, Brainiac is out. Superman kind of goes full tilt boogie for freedom and justice. He's feeling the necessity to destroy him and Luthor. The idea of losing Washington, D.C. is not sitting with him well. It's like weighing down on the Superman portion of him. And the women start seeing him losing himself, and now all of a sudden they don't want anything to do with him. I kind of was playing with the idea, like a Spider-Man 2. Does he start he loses his mojo? Does he start losing powers? But I thought, no, it's a possibility, but I'm just I'm not saying it's part of the story, but
I'd like to see a full-strength Superman for once.
Right.
We never get full-strength Superman in any of these sequels.
There you go. So for me, it's a crisis of conscience, and he kind of realizes that he's got to not dwell on Superman doucher man. He's got to be the man he's supposed to be, and realize his true self. He defeats Brainiac. He defeats Lex Luthor. And, of course, as always, he takes Brainiac's lair out of the ocean, pushes it out into outer space, and it explodes.
Does it blow a hole in the space-time continuum?
It does not.
Because I can change it to Superman 6.
Well, what happens is it explodes in a way where people end up thinking Superman is dead. And what this does is set up for, I want to say, the 2006. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Superman Returns. That's a terrible movie, but I do like the idea of that continuity.
So this is like the
sequel.
This is like the lost Superman story, right? I like it. I like it.
Well, there you go. We got a couple of sequels we've pitched. What are your ideas, everyone? Go ahead and write to us. Tell us what you like. Tell us which one of our sequels you like. Find us on Instagram. Find us on the Facebook. Find us on Twitter. This has been the Everything Podcast, the Superman edition. The next time you hear us, we'll be talking about Jaws. Jaws 2, 3, and 4 is coming up next. Tom Stewart is from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say goodbye, Tom.
It's not safe to go back in the water.
I'm Mike Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.